So the next item on the agenda is the presentation of the draft redevelopment plan for the South Lake TIF district. Lee Brown, I believe, is here to present this. Is that right, Dave? Yep, there you are, Lee. Thank you.
This is, for the most part, an update of what we've been doing and where we'd like to take the next steps. Starting with the fact that we have done the more formal identification of eligibility of the potential TIF district. I guess there's a bit of a typo, I think, in the agenda. It's the agenda refers to the South Lake TIF district. I think we thought it was the South Gateway TIF district. And if I'm wrong, I'm happy to change the cover page. But this is proposed as a potential TIF district on Old 53 near Half Day Road. We did do the formal identification of eligibility, and we found the presence of 6 of the close to a dozen factors that might be found to establish eligibility. The 6 that we found were obsolescence, dilapidation of certain structures, excessive vacancy, deterioration, inadequate utilities, and a decline in the relative decline in equalized assessed value. In this case, it's actual decline of EAV. When you put that all together, it identifies that if you choose to move forward, you can establish a tax increment district. It is not the same larger area that we had originally showed you early on, I think even in February. It's a more tightly defined district to assure that we meet eligibility and that we are only including properties that are currently within the village. That's an important element because the nature of a TIF district within a village or city is that it must be within the boundaries of that governing unit. And unless additional properties were to be annexed into the village, we can only include properties within your boundaries. So given that, and given the nature of essentially speculative nature as to whether or not additional properties might be brought in at a later time, our recommendation is to move forward with a district that is well-defined within the boundaries of the village. If you move forward and you do establish eligibility and then the redevelopment plan and go through the public hearing process and establish the district, if at a later time a property owner to the west, for instance, west of 53, chooses to annex to the village, the boundaries can be modified at that later time. So the fundamental that I'm bringing to you tonight is the fact that we have formally identified this area that you're sharing, that red line boundary. It excludes the properties that are within the developed part of the Menards site, but it does include outlots that lie to the southwest of Menards. It does include property on either side of 53. It does include the once anticipated right-of-way of the 53 extension, but certainly it also includes a primary property in the Geimer property on Old 53. I guess I'll take a pause and respond to questions if you have any at this point.
Any questions? Bobby, I think you're muted.
I have a question, and I can't think of the name of the road. Where at the north end of the map that shoots over to Old Hicks.
Dorothy Lane?
There's a Dorothy.
Yeah, Dorothy. Yeah, why that's included?
It happens to be within the area that was not included in the subdivision. It's a remnant of, it's a part that is part of the area that I believe was, may have been anticipated to be acquired by the state, but we've included it so that we make contiguity, that all the parcels within that area are contiguous, and so that There is a potential, depending upon what you choose to do with the district itself, that some improvements could be made to those, to that property, but it doesn't.
I guess my immediate concern when I saw it was I thought maybe somebody's thinking of access to Old Hicks.
We're not. We're simply trying to assure that the parcels in question are, 1, within the village, and 2, contiguous, and 3, when we add it all up, that they are eligible. It's a strange remnant parcel. That's all I can tell you.
Okay.
This is Vic. I will also add that the fact that it might be included in the plan doesn't confer any rights whatever. It's simply a matter of what would be included for the overall redevelopment proposal and the eligibility criteria.
And this is Dave. One of the things that we considered as we were considering the parcels was trying to extend the TIF district east-west as much as possible. And by including that strip, it continues it, kind of following that pattern. There's some strategic reasons for that, but it's not for access.
Is that parcel unincorporated currently, or is that in the village?
It is within the village.
And there's a newer single-family home down on that southwest corner. The driveway's in the village, and the house is in unincorporated Lake County. Is that parcel in here?
The only house that I'm aware of is actually at the
parcel. Yeah, the parcel to the north of the.
Yeah, I think it's
Up here somewhere. Yeah.
I think it's west of Old 53 and north of Dorothy Lane, right sort of at the terminus of what's shown as the boundary.
Yeah, there's actually 2 parcels up there. The parcel that is along 53 is not developed. The parcel that is to the east of that vacant parcel there is a house up there.
You don't have it, do you have it in here somewhere?
Well, this is a house that's like 2 years old. It was a prefab house. The driveway's in the village. The house is not.
Yeah, no, I know what you're talking about, but it's north of here.
That property is west of 53, and it's on the north side of Dorothy. That was a property that actually had been in the village. It was disconnected, but the access drive maintained its village presence, and that's why that is a bit of an anachronism in terms of how it gets to the property. But it might have been a little more than 2 years ago, but it was fairly recently constructed. But I believe it's just beyond the presentation that's on the screen right now. If you look at the far upper left corner.
I don't think it's that far north. I thought it was between Geimers and Menards.
Well, hold on, let me do
Like
one.
this, like
Yeah.
Let me just
that
Google map
rectangle.
it.
I think it is north, but it is east of 53,
It's on
Vic,
the
not
east side.
west.
Right. It's on the
And
east
it's
side.
red.
And there is a newer home on the west side tucked back in there. But yes, it's red and it was prefab. I watched them bring in the pieces of the house on trailers.
I got it right here. Let me see if I can share my screen again.
And we have excluded that. It is not included within the
Oh,
proposed area.
That's correct.
So even though the driveway is in Long Grove, it's Lake County, it's not the village.
I
Can
believe
you guys
that's
see my
correct.
screen?
That's correct.
It's right here. This is the house you're talking about.
Yes. Yeah.
See Dorothy Lane?
With the
Oh,
long
okay.
driveway. Yeah.
Yeah,
right.
that is actually 2 parcels. You can see the house is on the easterly of the 2 parcels, and then there is a vacant lot essentially on 53.
Okay.
But it's above where Dorothy
It is
Lane.
north of the Dorothy Lane
Yeah.
designation.
Right.
Yes, the only house that's actually shown within the proposed district is at the
Yeah, I'll show it to you right here.
southwest corner,
It's right here.
right?
This house right here.
Right. That
And
little-
it's actually 2 parcels. The house is on one lot, and there's a vacant area to the north of it that's owned by the same property owner.
right. Right. Yeah, all along there is the same property owner, I think. Thank you.
Understood.
So is that driveway an easement or is that on property that the house owns?
My understanding is that there is not an easement in that area, that they have a separate driveway to their house.
Okay, and it's.
Rita, I believe that the individual owns both parcels.
That's correct.
One parcel is in Long Grove,
Got it.
the other is not in Long Grove.
That's correct.
Okay.
This is Jim, that's correct.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Lee, you want to continue, or I know this isn't your document.
If you're ready, at this point, we're trying to bring you up to date on next steps as well, which is that this is a somewhat compressed process because of the nature of the notices that are required to bring this along. The next thing that would take place is the listing of a interested parties list that allows for residents or property owners to put their name or email address into the list so that they can get specific notifications of any public hearings or other activities related to this. Then following at probably your first meeting in September, we would be bringing the draft of the redevelopment plan. The redevelopment plan would, once you give your go-ahead, essentially, can be made available to the community so that they can see the intent of establishing a TIF district. We've done the initial work on that because it takes quite a bit of time to get that together. One of the things that we've done is begin to estimate values. The reason that we do that is to begin to create the framework for a TIF budget. And I want to take a stop there and explain the importance of the budget within the document and how it is used. There are only a limited number of things that are required in the Act to make the redevelopment plan essentially available for adoption. One of them is the current equalized assessed value of the properties within the district. The second is an estimate of what the equalized assessed value would be at the end of the district. By doing that, you're projecting essentially growth that will take place or could take place. From that, we make an estimate on an annual basis of what the incremental value would be for developed property if that occurs. And from that, provide an estimate to you of what may be available for public expenditures within the TIF district. And so those are listed in the document line by line as they are proposed in the state act to give you the eligibility of spending money for those eligible costs. You're not required, you're not bound by that. The number itself for each of those lines does not bind you for making those expenditures. But the bottom line of the budget creates what amounts to a maximum that you might spend over the 23-year life of the district. As such, we try to estimate a value that will allow you to remove the characteristics that make the project area eligible in the first place. So what are those costs? Well, among them are public improvements like roads and utilities and the extension of those two properties to make them developable. It might be the rehabilitation of an existing building or the reduction of the cost of land to a developer. That's called land write-down or assembly of property to make properties available. So the statute lists out a whole series of things that are eligible expenses if you can afford them, and you afford them if growth occurs and pays property taxes. All this gets wrapped up into a bottom line for how much might you be able to spend within the TIF district if things go well. But that's not a license to spend the money. What each of those lines provides is the opportunity to take those actions on a year-by-year basis or even a project-by-project basis and say, if we do this, will those monies be repaid? We're not suggesting that if we put millions of dollars at the bottom of that budget, that one, you are required to spend those monies, or two, that they will be repaid. They only get paid by incremental values if private growth occurs. So we prepare the document to give you the potential for making these public improvements or taking these projects and making them worthy of development, and then ultimately will generate tax revenues that are captured by the TIF district itself. But it does not require you to take any action to spend those monies. Those are going to be the decisions you're going to make going forward if you actually establish the TIF district. So let me take a pause there again.
If I may ask a question,
Please.
when I saw those 7 digits, I thought, whoa, this is a big number. And so correct me if I'm wrong. This doesn't say we have to spend any of this, but does it also not limit us to a number? So in other words, could you spend 10 if you needed to?
No, not without modifying the tax increment district. And that is an important element. So that number that's in there, we put
7.2 million.
7.2 million is one, a relatively conservative number based on what we say is the upper end potential development. The actual revenue stream that we project is much higher than that, but we want to plug in a number that makes sense for the kinds of improvements that might occur. But with the exception of a 5% cost of living increase, if you will, that number provides a cap to the total amount that you could spend within the district. Now, you note that each of those lines has a to be determined quote at the end. Before you next see this document, before it goes to the public in terms of the public review of it, we'll be plugging in numbers. But I wanted to reemphasize the fact that even when we put numbers in those, the individual lines don't limit you. It's the bottom line that limits you. So going forward, if you adopt the district, you might say, well, we actually have more need for expenditures of extending utilities and less in terms of recruitment or advertising or something like that. So you can move money between the lines without modifying or going through the process of amending the district or readopting. But the bottom line number is pretty much the cap that you should be sticking to.
Okay, so it's like a pot, and that 7.2 is in the pot, and you can move it around if you need to.
Yes.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
I have a question. Hypothetically, let's say a Tesla dealer wants to open a big dealership on that property, and they want us to put in the water and the sewer. Practically speaking, how does that work as far as what if putting in water and sewer for just hypothetically is $2 million? How do we come up with $2 million in order to accommodate the Tesla dealer?
Well, I'll give you 3 potential ways. One is that the Tesla dealer wasn't the first thing that occurred, that there were other developments that occurred before it that are currently generating or will be generating incremental value.
Well, let's say
so
they're not. No, let's say they're not.
So that one, that pay-as-you-go aspect of we have income coming in, we can spend it, that one we'll put to the side.
Okay.
The second is that in some cases you can encourage Tesla itself to spend the money for those public improvements, and you repay it over a period of time after they have built their building, because they're essentially going to get a rebate on their taxes so that they can come up with the capital and you don't have to necessarily put the capital out.
And we would do that by sales tax rebates over.
No, you would do it with a TIF district rebate of the increment that they're generating.
I see.
The third way is to borrow money. And that's probably, as I state, the third way. You'd prefer to have other people put out their capital investment, and you don't have to put that money out.
And you borrow through issuing bonds, or just
Bonds,
go
or
to
go
the
to a
bank?
bank or any other source that's legitimate. And many communities dedicate the incremental value to repaying that bond.
Well, how's this any different than Sunset Grove?
Doesn't sound like much.
If you went that route, right, Dave?
Well, keep in mind, Sunset Grove has, that Sunset Grove bond is actually one that was publicly sold. And in that regard, it would be very much the same. It's very different from the downtown bonds because those were not publicly offered or purchased. So, you know, we have a tale of two cities, so to speak, with our current TIF. And I think that the bond route that Lee was describing is what we did with the Sunset Grove bonds that were recently refinanced back in, I think, February. So that would be the model, I think, most likely to be used.
Okay, thank you.
Other comments at this point? Or proceeding forward is what everyone wants to do?
Could I have a reminder of what our next cost is?
Sure. Essentially, putting the documents in place and beginning to do the notifications, that's the next trigger mechanism. And I think, Dave, correct me if I'm wrong, there's up to $6,500 in that next phase.
Okay,
It's either 65 or 6,600.
Okay.
okay, thanks.
I have another hypothetical for you.
Please.
We probably don't qualify as being super successful with the Sunset Grove TIF. We're not making tons of money on it. But by that I mean we're not making tons of money. We're not scraping. But what could we have done there that we could do in the future to encourage it to be more successful, shall we say?
I'm not sure that I can weigh in on what you might have done differently in the downtown. I think that there's, in this case, I think that you can be very deliberate about tying development to development benefits, meaning providing incentives only where there's essentially a guarantee of return. I don't know if that's been the case in the downtown TIF.
Well, but see, the Sunset Grove one I thought was very successful. So maybe I'm misunderstanding.
Well, it's not throwing off tons of dollars that we're using.
Perhaps it's because we spent so much money.
So there's, as Vic alluded to, there's really a tale of two TIFs, even though it's a single TIF. The Sunset Grove portion of the TIF is doing very well. It actually is outperforming the projections, and that's how the village was able to refinance the bonds and get some additional revenues coming to the village. The portion that is not performing well was really anticipated not to perform all that well from the very get-go, and that was the downtown, simply because the downtown is fairly limited in size. The opportunity for being able to capture significant increment from the downtown itself is very limited, and the TIF was put in place for a number of different reasons, but one was to be able to drive the development where Sunset Grove is today, to generate the increment to not just pay for the improvements that were occurring as part of Sunset Grove, but also to help pay for the improvements that the village had planned for the downtown. So even before the TIF started, there were some costs that the village incurred and that had planned to invest in the downtown. It started with the Archer parking lot, and most recently, it ended with the various streetscape improvements, including the water and everything else. So there's really two very different components to the TIF. I would say that the Sunset Grove portion of the TIF is what we're suggesting is the norm and more what would be anticipated with the proposed TIF that we're talking about right now.
Trustee O'Connor, I will tell you another significant difference is that in this South Gateway TIF, the vast majority of property is undeveloped, or that in the case of Geimer is likely to be significantly redeveloped. If you're making small adjustments to existing buildings, you don't see a significant increase in incremental value, and therefore there's not a lot of money generated by the district. If, however, you're looking at what amounts to all of the vacant, undeveloped property, new buildings generate a significant change from the base value of the land itself up to new building value. That's where TIF district, that's where they are successful, when there's new buildings being built.
They generate revenue, obviously.
That's the reason.
Right, okay, thank you. And that makes sense to me. I think the only parcel in there that is residential is the one that is residential, the one we just talked about. All the rest is, we have said would be business or commercial of some sort in there. So, okay, thank you, that helps.
Are we at a point, I mean, everyone's in agreement to continue on and let Lee continue
Should
doing
we
the work?
vote on that?
Well, do we need to vote on it? That's the question. I guess we'll.
It's procedurally, it seems like a reasonable thing to do.
Well, let's go around the horn and do a straw poll on this, right?
No, I said vote. I didn't say straw poll.
Is a vote legally required or
No, it's not.
just desired?
I think we too often don't vote on things and some time passes and we're not sure why we did what we did. That's all I'm asking.
What are we voting on? This was a presentation.
The next expenditure.
We've already approved it, so
Right.
we can kill it at any time. So, well, help me with the procedure
Okay, then
here.
let's not
Zach or
vote.
somebody.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's fine.
Let me say first that on the agenda, it's not scheduled for a vote, so one is not required. That doesn't mean that the village board can't take a poll and make a determination that it's time to pull the plug. If that's the case, that can be done simply by direction from either the village president or the village manager, having been informed by the board's poll that we're not going to move forward anymore. And I think Lee is here, so it's going to be hard for him not to understand that in any case. So it's not going to be a formal vote. And the reason is that procedurally we cannot. It's not allowed under the Open Meetings Act, but we can certainly take a poll, which will provide, I think, the information that you're hoping to elicit, Bobby.
If you tell me to hold,
I think that the public appreciates knowing what's being done, and we so often leave things hanging. So I want to proceed.
Okay, so Bobby wants to proceed. Just go around the horn. Chris?
I'm okay to move forward. Thank you.
Okay, that's a yes. Jenny?
I've been pretty against it the whole time, and I'm going to stick with I would pull the plug, but I think everyone knows that.
Rita?
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of the TIF in general. I don't think I have a lot of problems with taking tax dollars away from schools and fire departments to give to businesses, and I think that I don't know that we have had a ton of interest in that location. I'm just not a fan of moving forward, and I think I've been pretty vocal about that the whole time.
Thanks, Jenny. Rita?
I'm good. We approved it. I'll take the next step.
Chuck?
Yeah, I think we can continue to move forward.
Okay, so you've got in the straw poll, you've got 4 yeses and 1 no. So you've got your direction.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lee.
All right.